Hi. As many of you know, I really did write a dissertation on the faces of Christ, and I got a book to prove it. See, right here. It says it's me. Now, it's a really convoluted title. The title is How Christologies May Be Shaped by the Broader Visual Cultural Environment. That sounds pretty impressive, doesn't it? Well, I'll tell you how I came to that. But first, I'd like to give you a little bit of my background. Most of you heard me describe our church, the Evangelical United Brethren Church, as the no fun church. Well, we did have some fun. We painted Easter eggs, I remember that. But you know, ever since I've grown up, I've lived with the Salmon vision of Jesus Christ. And you know who Salmon was? Salmon Werner Salmon did this portrait of Jesus Christ. Now, I'm sure most of you know who that picture is. You know that picture because it was, if you were like me, that's the one I grew up with. It was on my Sunday school cards in the primary department. It was on our Sunday school handout papers that we got when we made it up to the big tables. And eventually, it was the same thing on the bulletins that we received in church. You know, as I grew, and that's the only thing I knew, except when I got into the Army, and I realized that there really was another kind of Jesus out there. I just hadn't thought of it. Well, one of the things that I would like to tell you is that there are a lot of Jesuses out there. I should say pictures of Jesus. Now I want you to think about this. Think about how many pictures of Jesus were actually done while he was sitting for a portrait. None. We don't know what Jesus looked like. So we've been kind of scrabbling around and scrambling around in the darkness. I'm not going to give you a history lesson, but I am going to tell you that one of the things that you need to know about Jesus Christ is that even though we have no portrait of him, like we do of Julius Caesar and Alexander the Great and Plato and Socrates and all the other great thinkers and great generals in the world, we have no likeness of Jesus, only our imagination. Now, how can the person who affected the world more than any of these other people get away without having to sit for a portrait? Well, that kind of intrigued me, I'd be honest with you. So I started looking around, and on a trip to Bloomington, Indiana, when our daughter was getting her master's in speech pathology, I went to a football game, and she took me downtown to a little breakfast nook, and we ate there, and then we walked over next to a little store that was, I don't know, it was kind of a general gift shop. And there I saw Jesus pop-up dolls. You know, the kind you put on the table and it pops up. And I was so intrigued by this, and I was so incensed by it because Looking Good for Jesus lip balm was also being sold, and Wiggle Heads, and I mean, I came out of there storming. I was so angry, and then I started to think about it. Well, you know, it's better to introduce Jesus to some people than we really don't know if we're making an impact on them. Think back about when Christianity started, when Jesus was hung on the cross. Now, we have pictures of Jesus hanging on the cross, but they're not true. They're the artist's imagination of Jesus hanging on the cross. We don't know what happened. We do, as far as the visual image is concerned, we do know what happened based on the words, and from that, the artist extended to make a picture of Jesus hanging on the cross. Now, Jesus wasn't always the symbol. But you know, as I got more and more and deeper into this thing, I started to find out all kinds of Jesuses. I found Jesus on t-shirts, on shopping bags, on dolls. I found Jesus in little statuettes, and in puzzles and everything. So how can we decide if that affects our children or not? Elvis Presley wrote once wrote a song called Seeing is Believing. And the words were by Wes Spring. And in the first chapter, in the first verse, it says, every time I see the sun rise or a mountain that's so high, just by seeing is believing. I don't need to question why. When I see a mighty ocean that rushes on the shore. And the second verse is, if I ever had a cause to doubt him, I don't doubt him anymore. Oh, seeing is believing. And I see him everywhere, in the mountains, in the valleys. Yes, I know my God is there. Oh, in time I look above me, see the stars that fill the sky. How could there be any question? Only God can reach so high. You know, that's kind of a good synopsis of my belief. As Karen Stone points out, viewers bear considerable responsibility for artwork's interpretation. So what you see as Jesus in a lot of the artwork really wasn't him. You know, if you go to the catacombs off the Appian Way, there are some paintings on the wall, not of Jesus, but of a shepherd carrying a sheep. And from that, they decided it must be Jesus. They also have other signals, such as the anchor, which was eventually changed into the cross. And we had the sheep, of course, the good shepherd. And there was all kinds of fish, there was all kinds of symbols that communicated that this person was a Christian. Now, recently there have been contemporary individuals who made Jesus. But how do we know what Jesus looked like? Well, on the first sign, and I want to show you a picture of this, is Veronica's veil. And this is a picture of Veronica's veil. That's hard to see, isn't it? I mean, that's hard to believe that can be a picture of Jesus. But look at this. This is the artist's rendering of Veronica's veil in 1660 by Domenico Feti. So that's a lot different, isn't it? But then again, that looks a lot like Salman Warner's portrait of Jesus. We have the Shroud of Turin with the negative image of the shroud. And the shroud of Jesus, we look at the face and the detail of the shroud, looks like this. So you can see there were some pictures of Jesus, we think. Now, some people will say that the Shroud of Turin is a hoax. Some people say no, that when they did the carbon dating, it had been repaired several times, so they think they got some new parts. But then Warner Salman came out with his portrait of Christ. And the reason this became so popular was because it was in the mess kits. It was in the messes of the rations of the World War II soldiers, the C rations. Now, everybody knew who that was. But before then, Tintoretto's Before Christ was painted. And we have many, many, many different kinds of things, but we never have any picture of Jesus laughing. Now, we know Jesus, he was not a person who didn't like to have fun. So Ralph Kozak made a laughing Jesus. Well, when this first came out, everybody was going, oh my goodness, look at that. I can't believe you're doing that. But laughing Jesus showed us that Jesus was having a good time, that he was human. Now, I want you to go back and think about all the Jesus pictures that you saw. And when you first see Jesus, you see him as, this baby in a baby clothing with a 30-year-old face, and he's got his fingers up like this, ready to bless you. So it's reasonable to assume that forbidding the fabrication of idols was based on a sense of insignificance of visual images, because after all, God was a creator of all such things, was he not? So it says you should not make graven images. And for that, many times the church was against images. But Pope Leo the Great, he was the one that decided that, pictures really taught people the stories of the Bible. And if that gave the people a good impression of Jesus, then why not have it? There's no reason not to. So he decided that the more pictures they had in the church, the better. Well, from the Jesus with the little boy, and he was changing, and he became the Christ who was very official. He was 3D, or he was 2D, two-dimensional. Didn't have any look on his face other than, you want me to bless you, then you better live right. Christ wasn't really made human until the Renaissance. Now, when they moved the capital from Rome to Constantinople, that became the Byzantine influence era, the Byzantine era of Christianity. And during that time, Mary and the Christ child were kind of human, but not really human. The gulf between them was still kind of sad. It was still very, very unreasonable. But it was Giotto, that famous Renaissance painter, Giotto from Florence, who painted the chapel in Florence, where he has picture books of Peter, the life of Peter and the life of Peter's reactions. And he also painted the Scrivani Chapel. And there he has Jesus hanging on the cross, leaning forward, looking down in pain, looking very human. Now that really was different from the other pictures of Christ, who was not leaning forward. He was very much in control, had no emotions, but was on the cross. And if you see a lot of Catholic crucifixes today, they're based on Giotto's. Now, Pat and I were able to see the Scrivani Chapel, and it is magnificent. If you ever get to Verona, I really hope you go see that. Or Padua, Padua, not Verona. So we have this Jesus who's branching out. Now, all of a sudden, he looks human. All of a sudden, he's starting to be the kind of person that was described as totally human and totally divine. Here was a Jesus who suffered, who had emotions in his heart, who loved the little children, who the Jesus that we knew today. Now, I'm not going to go through the whole Renaissance and show you all the paintings, but one of the things I wanted to say that when Christ made it across the sea, he came with the pilgrims, that the ladies were the ones who taught the children to read. And they usually taught the children to read from a Bible. And the Bible was, the Bible to them was like not only a textbook, but was the living Word of God. And we're gonna get into the Bible a little bit later, but that's for another lesson. I want you to know that one of the things that we really enjoyed was our trip to Europe, to Italy, when we spent 3 weeks over there, going from cathedral to cathedral and looking at the different images of Jesus. During the Renaissance, he just became very human and seemed to pop out at you. There was the Church of the Gesù. I remember he's in the middle and he's ascending up to heaven, and the people are falling down out. Those who are sinners are falling out of the ceiling in plaster casts. It was truly amazing. But let's get back to the women here in the United States. The women taught the kids to read. They taught them from the Bible. And then Jesus became very effeminate. He was really, really one of the people who, I don't know, he was kind of like namby-pamby and milquetoast. He was very good and always right, but he was kind of soft. And they decided that really wasn't right. That wasn't right at all. For Jesus did a lot of walking. And he made a lot of trips back and forth. One of the things that I want you to remember is that there are two things that created Jesus as an outdoorsman who was this manly look, the strong Clark Kent look. And one of them was when Jesus was he was a person who did things. He was a person who walked all over Israel, what we know of Israel today. So why wouldn't he be well tanned and just ready to get up and go? I'm not going to get into the theology of this because it's. I read over it last night and I said to my wife, I said, "What a bunch of baloney this is." As I said, there were two things that made Jesus more manly. In his steps, which was started out as a serial in the Boston Globe, and was by Reverend Charles Sheldon. Now, this transformed Jesus into the social gospel. Then, The Man Nobody Knows, which was written by Bruce Barton, changed Jesus into the man we know now, the He-Man, the guy who walks everywhere. And that's what Salmon's picture came out of. Now, I want you to look at a couple of pictures because we know that Jesus did a lot of things that were not necessarily things that we would do normally. But here we have a picture of Jesus standing over a businessman, helping him make a decision. Here's Jesus with the family as they're reading the scriptures. And here's the Sinner by Ron DiCianni. And yes, we have stuff for the kids too. We have Jesus cutouts. We had Jesus statues of him playing football and coaching the kid. We had our Lenten offering envelopes, God-giving. As you can see, there are many, many different kinds of Jesus representations. But what does this tell us? Well, it tells us, first of all, that Jesus is alive and well, and Jesus is in our hearts. Jesus is always in our minds. Now, one of the things that really got me upset was see a t-shirt that said, "Jesus is my homeboy." I thought, why would anybody write that? Well, if that brought somebody to Jesus Christ and changed their lives, then I'm all in favor of it. I also saw Jesus with a pack of Luckies rolled up in his t-shirt. And this obviously was done before the smoking ban came out. He's got kind of the wild look, the jeans and the t-shirt, and he's going to do everything. But what do all these images of Jesus tell us? They tell us that we are hungering for an image of Jesus. Now, we have black Jesus, we have an Oriental Jesus, we have a white Jesus, we have a brown Jesus. I like to think of Jesus as kind of like when the disciples were preaching to the crowds on Pentecost. Each one heard that disciple preach in its own language. But here we're looking at Jesus. Now, does that mean he was black, brown, or white? No, it doesn't, because I think each person sees Jesus in the image that he wants to see Jesus in. If he's black, he wants to see a black Jesus. If he's brown, he wants to see a brown Jesus. If he's white, he wants to see a white Jesus. If he's yellow, he wants to see a yellow Jesus. And this is all that builds together, because Jesus isn't a racist or anything like that. Jesus is one person, and he is for everyone. Now, recently, a group of scholars came out with a picture that they said, based on all the information they had and where he comes from, this is what he looks like. Jesus is kind of ugly. See, I don't believe that. I think Jesus is beautiful. Now, are they right? Probably not, because they didn't sit Jesus down and say, let us sketch you as you are. How do you look at Jesus? Do you look at Jesus on a t-shirt that says, Jesus saves my all, Jesus is my homeboy, he makes me strong? Jesus does all those things. What you have to do is to picture Jesus not in your image, but the image God sent him. And that can be any way you like. But you've got to look at Jesus as a loving, kind, and caring individual. Well, that kind of accounts for this whole thing, Jesus in the Cultural Image. If you want to read my book, good luck. It's kind of boring. Actually, it's very boring. So with that, I'm going to say goodbye and happy trails.